Today's interview is with the amazing Sophie from Bright Emotions C.I.C. Sophie is just absolutely incredible. When I saw her on Instagram and the work she was doing, I just had to get in touch and reach out. Very similar passions to us around helping children to understand their emotions, helping them to have some management techniques, some strategies, safe expression of those big feelings, building confidence and self-esteem, and as well as having good, positive relationships in their life. It was just such a lovely chat, wasn't it?
It absolutely was, and just such a parallel between her service and ours. Just wonderful work that she's doing, as are we in Derby. And yeah, Sophie, she's just a lovely, lovely person, just kind-hearted, compassionate, obviously cares so deeply about her children that she's supporting, and well, all children like we do as well. Just hopefully a lovely conversation. We explored a lot of things, including emotional health within curriculum,
also additional needs. She herself is autistic with ADHD, and she talks about that and how that's impacted her ability to regulate her emotions in her life, and how that really does drive the change that she wishes to see. So we hope that you enjoy the very interesting conversation with the very wonderful Sophie at Bright Emotions, and we'll see you next week. Hello, Sophie.
Hello.
We're so excited to have you on. As you know, I've been stalking you on social media for quite some time because anyone that I see on there, and I think we've probably spoken about this with most people that we've interviewed, but I just love connecting with people who I know get what we do, the importance of what we do. And I suppose it would be great as a starting point for you to tell a little bit in your words, what's your background and what do you do now with that background?
So I suppose I sort of the journey started when I studied psychology, really, and as a parent as well. So I have my own son. He's now nearly going to be 13, which is a bit scary. But yeah, so as being a parent, my background sort of in psychology, and then I've worked in sort of various support roles with young people and children, families, different charities around where I am in Bedford. My passion for emotional literacy sort of developed from doing those different roles. Along the way, hearing sort of families and parents' point of view on sort of what is missing, or how they feel like they're not getting the support or where to find that support. And I noticed there was a massive gap there for those children that don't maybe meet the criteria of sort of CAMS or other services like that, and are then just sort of left with nothing. So I think for me, it was sort of looking at what's needed in that area, and early intervention was sort of massively important, not just, putting in things when it all goes, bit tits up. It's about, putting it in there way, way, way before that. And Bright Emotions was born.
And it's not been plain sailing, has it? We had a quick chat before we hit record about something that Nikki and I can relate to massively, that it's not easy. I think we've had a few emails just this week stating, oh, can we talk to you about what you do and why you do it, and can we do it? And it's just so many years of really hard work trying to break down barriers. And something we were talking about before that record button was hit was that fatigue around that generates that feeling like we're unheard, or and I suppose that's why we're drawn together to people who get it and understand, because you can feel quite tired just advocating for the change for that early intervention. And you spoke about a break that you took late last year and how that led you into actually those systems, and far from it being the thing that you thought, oh, just it's too much, that actually it gave you a massive kick up the backside and was like, no, this stuff really does matter.
I think especially when you're working independently, it's quite easy to lose sight of why you started in the first place anyway. And I think I had I suppose I sort of went in with this vision of me trying to change everything on my own and wanting to make all this difference, which is great, but I can't do it on my own. It's never going to happen on my own. And I think I had to sort of alter my perspective on things. And I think taking that break, although it wasn't really something that I wanted to do, I didn't want to sort of put things to bed and stop doing the work, because it's, you know, my passion. I love it. But I think it was needed, and I'm glad that I did it, because now that I've come back, I'm looking at things completely differently, and it's spurred me on. And I suppose the passion has probably grown even more because I've worked in a school and I've seen all the inside of what's going on, and I really see that what you guys are doing and what I'm doing is needed more than ever.
I can relate so much, Sophie, to what you're saying, much like I'm sure Jen would have had that conversation before with you. That fatigue, that tiredness, exhaustion of actually the advocating part of it, I think, is really, you feel like doors are closed and slammed in your face sometimes. And I can just relate to that. It feels relentless. You're trying to wave the flag for all these children and make change across the UK, within school systems, within health systems, within all of the systems, that sometimes it feels just too much and nothing's ever going to change. And you have like, well, I mean, Jen, I think we've talked about this a lot in the time, but you have times almost like waves of, yes, I'm making a change, this is brilliant, and then like something knocks you back again, and you hear from another school that's local to us that's done something that, oh, you just, come on, I thought we were getting somewhere, and then it's just another knockback. So yeah, completely relate to that. It is exhausting.
You know, those that do these sorts of roles that we're in are always incredibly sort of empathetic anyway. So I think we probably feel it 10 times more than, you know, maybe your average person. It's sort of, yeah, it does get tough. And I think I've come back with probably more understanding that I need to put my energy in places, just being more careful where I put my energy, how I'm looking after myself, and things like that, which I probably wasn't doing before, which probably leads to a lot of burnout. So I think I'm a lot more aware of that as well, which is important because it's what we teach other people to do. So we have to do it ourselves.
What we preach.
Making me laugh because I'm just thinking of the conversations Nikki and I have had where she said, Jen, you just need to stop and take a step back and look after you. And I think because so much of why there are so many reasons that bring you to the point of where you do the work that we all do. And I think for me, one of those things was so I could manage my health better. And the ironic thing was, it was like this tidal, this tidal wave where it was actually having the opposite effect on my health. And I think that's something that, interesting that you say as well, that it's almost like reminding yourself of what you're trying to educate others about and how to implement that into your own life. And that's such an important reminder, and I think I'm doing better at that now. But I think it is a constant sort of reminder. What I love about the work that you do, Sophie, is of everybody in that arena, I suppose I feel like there is the most similarities between Bridge the Gap and Bright Emotions, perhaps than any other organisation we've connected with, that you do a lot of parent and child workshops. Can you talk to us a little bit about why you chose to really sort of, I suppose, invest your time and put your energy into that area?
So a lot of the workshops we do, I try to involve parents as much as possible because I think it's important for them to hear what's going on, to learn themselves, and also have time to connect with their child as well, because I think we neglect that side of it a little bit, and it gets hard everywhere, everything's so busy, you know, life is always so busy, we never sort of take that time to just sit for an hour and play, or, you know, read a book. And those things I think often get pushed out quicker than other things. So yeah, I've always tried to make that a point, that if we're going to be doing some sort of emotional literacy activity, whether it's a craft or whatever, the parents are there sitting alongside, and it's trying to sort of encourage them to get involved in what's going on. Because I was never taught how to manage my feelings or how to express my feelings in a healthy way. It's probably something that I've learned as an adult, really. So I think that's the same for a lot of adults as well, that they're not sure how to do it themselves. So if they can come along and they hear what we're teaching their children, that they're going to also learn something as well.
Powerful, isn't it? I think it's a powerful space that's safe and is not at home and it's not at school, and it's another relationship that you can build in, whereby the child but also the parent is given permission to feel and to talk about emotion. And I think it's incredibly connecting, like you say. And for us, they've been really popular sessions, because I think the feedback that we get time and time again is this has given us time together and bonding together, and it opens the door then for us to be able to speak about emotions with each other, whereas perhaps before that permission wasn't there, and the child spending time, you know, feeling all of this feeling and not knowing what it is. And equally the parent wants to broach it but doesn't perhaps know how to. So it's almost the start of that opening the door a little bit to it.
Yeah, I think it definitely opens those conversations that wouldn't have been had before. Like, I mean, sitting sort of doing a craft, or, you know, something that sort of takes that pressure off as well. So it opens up those conversations, but not in sort of a scary way.
You're modelling that as well then, aren't you? You're modelling that as a practitioner in how to communicate emotion, how to model that at home, how to drip it in with it without it having to be a whole let's sit down and talk. It's through play, it's through creativity, it's through just going for a walk together. All of that wonderful stuff, isn't it?
Not intense. That's what we always say, isn't it? That we've been almost programmed as a society to be quite fearful of emotion and feelings, and if I open that door, will it be too much? Will it upset my child further? Will it give them ideas about having difficult emotions in their life? And for us, it's taking away all of that stigma and all of those myths and saying, actually, the absolute opposite is true to that. And it doesn't have to be intense, and it doesn't have to be scary, and it can be fun and bonding and brilliant. And I think it's what I needed as a child and my parents, but also as a parent myself, which I know is something you've spoken about. Also on your website, it talks about the fact that from a young age you struggled with your own emotions, with your mental health. How much of that, I suppose, has that been a driving force in creating Bright Emotions?
Oh, I think massively. I am turning 31 this month, but at the beginning of the year I was diagnosed ADHD and autistic. So at the age of 30, having that, it's been a massive sort of relief for me to know that, but also sort of some sadness to know that sort of growing up, that was probably a massive reason why I did struggle emotionally and sort of with my mental health. And I think, unfortunately, for a lot of children that I work with, it's the same, and I can massively relate to what they're going through. So I think, 100% that's been a big reason why I started what I did, and why I've got such a massive passion for it, because I can really relate to the struggles that some of the children we work with are going through, and the families, and the whole diagnosis process and everything. So it's definitely something that sort of spurred me on.
That change, isn't it? And it's so interesting how I cannot believe how many of these conversations we've had where where the person that we're interviewing has kindly shared with us a recent diagnosis of ADHD or autism. And I think that's so important and incredible that we're having these conversations now. And I saw one of my friends whose daughter has ASD with a PDA profile. She has ADHD as well as some other difficulties. And she was saying things that you don't want to hear as an autistic parent. Oh, like, oh, you don't seem like it. And all of this kind of stigmatized language that's probably meant with really great intention, but actually what it's sending a message out of, you should be in this box then if you're this person. And it's just so fantastic to hear people talking so openly and about a diagnosis in a positive way, in how that's helped to find that understanding of why you found certain things difficult. But I think having people out there who can say, guess what, me too,
yeah,
young people, is just everything.
yeah,
I think as well it's proof, and going against those kind of older stereotypes, it's proof that you can have additional needs and still be incredibly competent, manage your own business, create passion around advocating within systems like you are doing, Sophie. Is providing that message to young people, isn't it?
yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah. And I think it's that, I suppose, back to sort of the, you know, doing the workshops with the parents as well, it sort of helps to, now this is showing my ADHD because I've completely forgotten what I was going to say.
Well, were you going to say something along the lines of is that actually it helps reduce that stigma for the parent as well, and some of the fear they feel for their child if they've had a diagnosis, because I do think that that's something that we see a lot of at Bridge the Gap, parents who are actually quite fearful of that diagnosis and what that means for their child's future.
Yeah.
That is something that, I mean, being really frank and honest, I think a lot of the times that we have perhaps some conversations with some parents where they're trying to parent the child so that they're not autistic, so that they are almost being compliant with society's needs rather than their own. And I totally get that. And I, you know, I'm not judging them for that, but I think that acceptance of parenting the child you have, and I suppose if I was a parent in one of your sessions, not knowing what I know, and for my daughter who, you know, we've been on a journey with, that fear, that reduction of fear of, oh no, they're great, like I don't have to be afraid of that.
And it's such a big journey for both child and parent. It's really, and for parents, I think you have to be, gosh, I mean, you come up against so many hurdles through that whole journey. And I think often for those children that are not, you know, it's not it doesn't display in a stereotypical way, you've got to almost fight for that diagnosis, which it shouldn't have to be like that, but we are put in that position. So I think for parents, it is a really, really exhausting process. So it's nice for them to come along and feel safe, and they can sort of let go of all of that. And like we were saying, have fun as well. It's, you know, it's really important to have fun with it, you know, and meet other parents as well that are in the same situation.
I would say that's probably one of my favourite areas of support that we deliver at Bridge the Gap, is those parent and child sessions together in small groups where, like you say, Sophie, they are starting to talk with each other, but also other parents and carers in that room as well, and realising that even just walking into the room, you're not alone. on this journey or on this process that you've got a child that's struggling and you're struggling as a parent, finding the support, going through the HCP process, whatever that looks like, and that frustration along the way, it's so much. I would probably say at least 70-80% of the parents that I speak to, their conversations like this: I don't know where to turn, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to break down that barrier, break down that door to try and get my child the support that he or she needs. And it's exhausting. And the feedback that we get from those sessions from parents and children, but also from parents themselves as well in individual sessions, is, gosh, I could just offload it all, and that is so much. I can just talk about my feelings in relation to it with somebody that's not giving me any judgment, with somebody that gets it. And that, I think, is a weight off sometimes, just to have that conversation.
Yeah.
What is the goal that you would I mean, we've talked about how we can't do it on our own, but as a collective, what is the change that you wish to see?
I'd love to see a change in the school system. So I think the early intervention, like starting from, even nursery age, or starting school 4 or 5, emotional literacy being something that is taught in schools as part of a curriculum, rather than it being maybe 1 hour or a couple of hours during a term or something. It actually being something that's taught every single week. I think it's important to have teachers trained in this as well. I think it's really difficult because I know that it's not teachers themselves. There's so many amazing teachers, and they work incredibly hard. I think it is just the system in general. But I do think there is a lack of awareness and acceptance in schools, particularly of those that are neurodiverse. I think it's still very much something that's not really dealt with appropriately always. So I think sort of dedicated maybe teams would work better, that every school needs to have sort of a dedicated team that can work on specific areas. I know a lot of schools have sort of pastoral teams and things like that, but I think good, decent training for those pastoral teams and support for those schools and pastoral teams and teachers is also really needed. The whole system needs a massive look at. That would be the change that I want to see. Is, I suppose, it starts early, and sort of we're educating children around it early as possible.
Just amazing. I love recording this podcast, because there's so many of us wanting the same thing. And I think that early intervention is so key, is if we are to reduce the stigma we face if our child isn't behaving, they should be engaging in a particular and specific way in the classroom, and that's not happening, that stigma that comes onto the parent as well. It's like getting people to understand that this is information you need to know, but you're trying to get them to know that before they know they need to know it. And I know that's a conversation we had with Jackie and Claire as well, Nikki, about how do you get people to engage with something that perhaps they don't know they need.
Tough part, isn't it? It's like we always say, it's you send your children to swimming lessons to stop them falling into the deep water and struggling to know how to stop themselves from drowning. But we have got kids that are drowning in terms of mental health need. So how do you put that, and how do you put it across that children need this so proactively within the school system from day dot, like you were saying, and not just one lesson, but dripped through the entire curriculum, modelled by teachers who get it and that have had up-to-date amazing training in this, but also training around additional needs and neurodiversity, and how the school system is perhaps not meeting that. And how do we step outside of the box and meet that need for that child, and not just try to pigeonhole them into a system that doesn't work for them?
So important. I think back to myself and just think about how I felt sat in classrooms and how unsafe I felt a lot of the time in my body, where my brain was going, how I found it so hard to learn, and the stigma and shame that that generates for yourself, especially if you've not got a way of understanding how that feels and then being able to express it. When I look back to little Jen with some very vivid memories of being in school, feeling so anxious, so wanted to run away, but was silent, you just think, gosh, there is so much that needs to happen, because whenever I feel fatigued, I think about how I felt in that classroom, and I wasn't being, at that point, disruptive. I wasn't being, the loud one. Perhaps, I became disruptive in other ways in my teenage years, but at that point, at that early intervention point, if someone had have asked the right question at the right time, noticed the right things, then maybe it would have prevented so much additional trauma in my life and so much mental illness that I had to go through, that I might not have had to go through that if I'd have had someone to if I'd have been able to go to a Bright Emotions session or a Bridge the Gap session, or if my teachers had perhaps had that. And I know I'm ancient, so I'm definitely not 31 too, but so I appreciate this is quite new evidence and research in terms of the last 20 years. It's amazing. But equally, if they'd have had just that little bit of understanding, not just on emotional literacy, but warning signs that a child might be struggling in a classroom, so that you don't constantly get that back, well, they're fine in school, because I was not fine in school. There wasn't one part of me that felt fine in school. And you're invalidated the whole time when you're hearing that as a child. You're thinking, but I'm not. But I don't understand why I'm not, and I don't understand what this is, and I certainly don't know how to tell you, and I don't feel safe enough to tell you anyway, even if it's just so confusing. For me, what we all do is try and find the end of this ball of string of all of that, and we just take a little bit of the end for a child, and we start to pull very gently, and we tease it out, and it takes a long time to unravel that ball of string. But my goodness, when you start to do that along the way, everything just feels so much clearer and safer. And I think that's what we all want, isn't it, for every child and parent?
I like the ball of string analogy. That's a really good one.
What's your goal in terms of Bright Emotions? Because you've just had some exciting news we briefly touched on before we hit record.
So I've come back into, sort of after this break, I've come back into it, and I've sort of hit the ground running, and I think I've taken more of sort of a creative, sort of therapeutic approach. So we're doing sort of painting sort of workshops, which children are absolutely loving, more sort of crafty things, which I massively enjoy doing all of that. And that's something that I think for my own mental health, I sort of enjoy painting and making things, and it's a little bit of accountability that I have to do it as well, I've sort of brought all of this back, which is great. And we've also been given a venue, which is absolutely amazing. So we've got a venue at the moment that it needs sort of no major works, but it just needs to be, look a bit less sort of clinical, I suppose, doing a little bit of work to make it comfortable for people to come into. The goal for me, I would love to make that into sort of a community hub and have it used all the time, loads of different workshops, and just a place for people just to pop in and have a chat, have a cup of tea, bring their kids along after school, have a play. I think for me that would be amazing. It's in an ideal space for that to happen. and I would really love for it to go that way. So I hope it does. I really hope it does. So it's a whole new sort of adventure for me, because I've never done anything like this before. So it feels very exciting, but completely out of my comfort zone. But I just keep telling myself that doesn't mean that sort of feeling you get isn't a bad feeling. It's just because you're doing something you've never done before. Yeah, so I have to keep reminding myself it's okay, it's okay.
It's not avoiding your goal because of that difficult emotion that comes with it. That vision is just amazing, and I think both Nikki and I are like nodding along.
Incredibly parallel, Sophie. Incredibly so.
But imagine if every area, not even every city, imagine if every suburb in a city had a space like that, that people who could come just because it's a nice space to be and connect with other people, play. I love how you kept bringing play back into it. And equally, if there were any concerns about how your child was presenting with behaviour or emotional regulation, that you had somewhere to go and just ask the question and access really fun early intervention. I mean, the world would literally be changed forever, and in a really, really, really amazing, positive way. Brilliant. Thanks so much, Sophie. So we end every episode with a question, and it is, if you were able to give yourself a bit of advice looking back to you as a child, what is something you've learned that you wish you could have told your younger self?
I think I would probably keep going. It gets better. I think I would say that. I feel a bit emotional saying that as well. I think because it is so up and down, but you learn from the downs and you learn from the ups. But I would say, yeah, keep going. It gets better.
Perfect message to end on as well. And for any person, not just young person, who finds himself listening to this podcast, to remember that, to keep going. It gets better. You can learn to paddle in that water. You don't need to drown in it. And I think that's such an important message.
Yeah.
So it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. We'll look forward to hopefully meeting at some point in the future as well, in person.
Definitely love to come up and see you at your place. That would be great.
It would be
Lovely. You are more than welcome.